Thank you for coming to this last seminar of our fair today. This one is especially dedicated to families who have already made up your mind to apply. So this is about applying successfully. And so the topic is about admission and specifically interview tips. So as most of us know, in applying for American boarding schools, interviews are not just another mandatory component. It is arguably a very, very important component, a very decisive component of the ultimate admission decision. So being able to do well in an admission interview is very critical to the ultimate success of the entire process. Now, many of us go through the application journey, which takes on anywhere from 6 months or more, or all the way to 12 months' time in that process of planning. And so we want to do it, and we want to do it successfully. All right, so this seminar is about how to conduct the interview successfully. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the speaker of today, Ms. Angela Brown from Dana Hall. And without further ado, I'll pass the microphone over to Angela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Brown, and I am the Assistant Head of School for Admission and Strategic Initiatives at Dana Hall School. We're right outside of Boston, a girls' boarding school that's academically ambitious and rich with opportunity. Happy to speak to you more about Dana Hall in the fair, but I'm here today to speak to you about admission interviews. I'm actually going to disagree a bit with Daniel because the admission interview is absolutely a part of your application, but unless you throw a pie in the face of the admission counselor, you're not going to ruin your application with your admission interview. So I want to put you at ease. Parents, take a deep breath. Students, take a deep breath. Truly, truly, this can be really fun if you allow it to be. Parents, you have to allow your kids to have fun, okay? So I'm going to talk you through the 2 most important tips. Then I'll share some things because sometimes we have virtual interviews and sometimes we have in-person interviews. So I want to give you some things to think about. I have a couple of extra tips and then I can answer your questions. I want to start by telling you this is my 24th year working in American private schools. 24th year. Do you want to guess how many students I've interviewed in 24 years? Thousands of students. I've read thousands of applications. This is one of the reasons why Daniel has asked me to speak to you. I have been doing this for many years. I want you to trust that what I'm going to tell you makes sense for American boarding schools. And I want you to hear me out, even if it feels a bit different than what you think you should be thinking about for your admission interview. How many students are in the room? Raise your hand. Okay. Students, what does this say at the top? Be yourself. This is tip number 1. If you get this down, you're golden. You must be yourself. Really important, the interview is a conversation. It's not a test. I'm going to say that again. The interview is a conversation. It's not a test. A test is when you don't know the answers. You don't know what to share. You don't know what's on the test in a math test, but you know everything to know about you. You know what you're interested in. You know who lives at home with you and what you do for fun. You know what kinds of sports you might want to try in boarding school. You have all the answers. So it's not a test. It's just a conversation. Okay? It's a conversation, not a Test. Excellent. So you need to be yourself. We want to really get to know who you are, what interests you inside and outside of school, what you might contribute to the school community, what you like, what you dislike, who lives with you at home. We just want to know you. And it's really important that you show up and show us who you are and not pretend to be someone else. Because if you start saying things that you think we want to hear, and then we ask you a follow-up question, and you think, well, I don't know, I just made that up, right? We just want to know who you are. So if you love soccer or anime or playwriting or juggling, it doesn't matter. We just want to get to know you because you are the person we are considering for admission. Okay. I want to give you an example. I have two examples, one for the parents. And this is where I really want you to remember how important it is for you to let your child be him or herself. Almost 20 years ago, I still remember this student from almost 20 years ago. I interviewed a young man. He was the third interview of the day for me. And he was the third young man who told me he loved lacrosse. And for whatever reason, I was just interviewing a bunch of boys that day who all loved lacrosse. And I guess by the third interview, I just said, what is it about lacrosse? And this 13-year-old boy looked at me and said, I don't know. I get to wear a helmet and just feel like a man. It was so genuine. His parents would probably freak out that he said that, but it was so genuine, so funny, and so real about why he liked lacrosse. I still remember that, and it was 2003 when I interviewed him. That's how important it is to be yourself. Students, I'm going to give you an example. Does anybody know what a herpetologist is? Wow, tell me.
It's somebody who studies reptiles and amphibians.
Someone who studies reptiles and amphibians. Thank you very much. What's your name? Kiro. Nice to meet you, and thank you for that answer. She was right. A herpetologist studies amphibians and reptiles. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'm not a big fan of reptiles and amphibians, but I interviewed a student who was so intrigued by frogs and toads. We talked about it the whole interview. This student just loved frogs and toads. It didn't matter that I didn't. It didn't matter that I kind of inside was like, wah! He was so excited about frogs and toads. I was excited that he was excited. It's important to let your student be him or herself and show what they really find interesting, what they like and dislike, because that's the way we really get to know them. So, what's tip number 1? Be yourself. Thank you very much. Number 2. Whoops, sorry. Went back, went forward, giving away all my things. All right, tip number 2. Ask good questions. What's tip number 2?
Ask good questions.
Okay. It's really important that even though it's a conversation and you will be asked many questions because we're trying to get to know you, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask a question or 2 or 3. It's important for you to prepare a couple of questions in advance. And here's what I want you to think about when you consider questions to ask. First, is this a question that has an answer I could easily find on the website? Can a student in this audience give me an example of a question you probably could easily find the answer to on the website? Yes. What is the acceptance rate? That is probably something you could find on the website. What's another example of a yes? How many students are in your school? Yes. What's the student to teacher ratio? Do you have swimming? These are questions that don't really spark a conversation. They're simple facts, they're yes or no, and they don't really show you any more about the school. Can a student in the room think of a question that might be intriguing enough, might be challenging enough for the admission counselor that I couldn't just point you to the website for the answer. Yes.
Is space held for students to get to know each other and interact with
Is space held for students to interact with each other and get to know each other peer to peer? Excellent question. I'd have to think about that before I answered. It's not a simple yes or no, because you want to know how, right? So instead of asking, do you have swimming? Because can you find that on the website, right? What could you ask if you're a swimmer and you're excited about swimming? What could you ask an admission counselor that has to do with swimming but isn't just a simple yes or no? Anybody have an idea? Here's an example. You could ask, how does the swim team show its school spirit? That question gives you a little bit more information about the school culture, the community, how students celebrate each other, how they support each other. But do you have a swim team only gives you a simple fact, and it's a fact you could have found out on your own. So when you're thinking about a couple of questions, and I think you should only have 2 or 3, 30 is a little too much, okay? 2 or 3, when you think of those questions, say to yourself, is this easily found on the website? Now, I do think you can use the website to help spark your curiosity. As you're looking at social media or the website, you might find something interesting to ask. Let me tell you another question I've been asked once. What's the worst meal in the dining hall? I had to give an honest answer, right? There's always a worst meal. Even if your dining hall is fabulous, there's probably a meal that kids are kind of like, oh gosh, I can't believe this is what they're serving today. We're not going to put that on the website, right? But it was an interesting question. So again, think of a question that you can't easily find the answer on the website. Virtual interviews. By this point, we've all been on Zoom in some way. Whether it's for a class or connecting with relatives far away, there are lots of different things to think about, but you've probably been on some virtual meeting already. So it's not as new as it was for us a couple of years ago. And I want to let you know, there's no priority given to an in-person interview. If your interview is virtual, that's perfectly fine. They wouldn't offer it if they didn't think it was a fine option. When you have a virtual interview, there are a couple more things you have to think about. You might want to think about these things in advance. Number 1, just like if you were in a Zoom class, can you be seen and heard clearly? Now, you may not live in a space where you have a lot of privacy. That's fine. But maybe you just tell the different members of your family, you've got a 30-minute conversation, you need some quiet. If your dog barks or your baby brother cries, that's fine. We're very used to that. But you might want to think about a couple of things, like your Zoom background. What's an example of a calm Zoom background? Yes. Your room, you could use your room. Now, is your room super messy? No, great. You can have a messy room, but there's lots of different ways you can have a blurred background. But there's also those kind of cool techniques you can do with your Zoom background, and you have this funky picture of Taylor Swift, and we don't want to be distracting. So if you have a fun Zoom background that you like to use with your friends, maybe of a pop star or some sort of animated something and they're changing colors, choose something that's calm enough so that the admission counselor can just focus on you and not your wacky background, okay? Also, make sure we can really see you. We all know, we've all been part of a Zoom where the camera angle wasn't actually great and you're looking up someone's nose the whole time, right? So we want to make sure we can see you. Now, parents, this is for you. Unless you don't have the space to move around, please do not be in the room with your son or daughter. I know you want to make sure they're doing a great job. I know you want to hear everything they are saying. We can tell when you're in the room, even when you're not on camera. We can tell. I promise you, we can tell. So please just step out. You'll have your chance to speak with the admission counselor. But the body language of your son or daughter, we can absolutely read when a parent is in the room. Their eyes are darting, they're not sure, they answer something, they get nervous in a way. We don't want that. So please step out of the room, okay? Other things to think about, we all know in Zoom, you can have a nice professional look on top and a kind of party on the bottom, right? In Zoom, you could be in your very fluffy pajama pants. That's fine, but keep in mind, there might be a time where you have to get up and go get your parents to join the call. And when you get up and we see your fluffy pajama bottoms, we might see that. So if you want us to see that, fine, but just keep that in mind of what you're wearing on the top and the bottom. Okay. I also think it's important for you to know, just because you have a virtual interview and we can't see your hands or anything else going on, this is not the time to write out all your answers and tape them all around your computer. Okay? We can tell you're reading. And when you read your answers, we don't feel like we're getting the real you. And it also, unfortunately, gives us a sense that you don't feel strong enough in your English to have a one-on-one conversation. And that starts to send off little red flags. So it's perfectly appropriate for you to think in advance of some things you want to share about yourself. As I said, you want to be yourself, but sometimes maybe you're not used to people asking you that many questions about yourself, or you don't remember the author of the last great book you read. You can take a minute or two before your interview to think about that, but don't write paragraphs and stick them all around your computer, and then you get an answer and you're just That doesn't feel like a conversation. Okay? All right. In person. I suggest that you dress the way that makes you feel comfortable and confident. If you don't like wearing a suit jacket and tie, don't wear a suit jacket and tie, because you'll be fidgeting the whole interview because you're in something that doesn't make you feel good and you're not used to it. If you don't like wearing dresses, don't wear a dress for the interview. Be yourself, be comfortable, because the more physically uncomfortable you are in your clothes, the more nervous and just uncertain you feel about yourself. So do yourself a favor and just wear what makes you feel good. Typically, we speak to parents and students separately. Again, that's because we really want to have an authentic conversation with the student. So parents, perfectly appropriate for you to come with your 2 or 3 good questions as well. But we are really wanting the opportunity to talk to your child one-on-one and then to talk with you and answer any questions that you might have. Okay, a couple more tips before the interview. Here are a couple things. I find that some parents like to wait to the very last minute to schedule their interview because they think, if I wait till January 14th, the day before the application is due, my child will know that much more math than he would have known in November. We're not going to ask your child any math questions. It doesn't matter when in the cycle they interview, and I would say the earlier the better. So schedule early. Don't try to wait it out. It's also important when you're scheduling to look at not only your calendar or perhaps your spouse's calendar, but also your child's calendar. Sometimes your child has a field trip you weren't aware of, or there's a doctor's appointment. You want to look at those things because it can be difficult when families cancel or try to reschedule repeatedly. Get all your things in order first before you schedule the interview. Okay? I would also suggest you write down the school's phone number or save it so that if you're running late, you can let them know. And you can let them know that if you're in person running late or on Zoom, you can send a quick message to let them know you're running late. I would also suggest before a virtual interview that you practice logging on. Just practice. So then you're not flustered the first time you do it. You can just give yourself a practice run. Oh, well, what happened there, everybody? So sorry. This is a very sensitive after the interview. I want to tell you, no matter what you've heard, sending 10 thank you emails after an interview is not the best way to make yourself known to a school. One thank you email after the interview is sufficient. How many? One. You may think that if I send an email every week from my interview to the time of the decision, Miss Brown will remember me and will know how interested I am, and she will say, yes, I will remember you. But perhaps not in the way you want me to. Parents, let's be honest. How many emails do you want to receive at work, right? One thoughtful email that is 3 sentences. It doesn't have to be a book, right? That you appreciated the opportunity to chat, you learned X, Y, or Z, you are, remain interested in Dana Hall School. Have a great day. It should not be 30 paragraphs. And because we know you are interviewing at several schools, we think you should apply to more than one school. Guess what often happens? You're sending the same email to lots of schools. That makes sense. Sometimes you forget to proof. And you say, I really, 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 really want to go to Emma Willard, but I'm Dana Hall. Very important to proof your email so that you're showing interest, but you're showing interest to the right school. Okay, this happens. I wouldn't be telling you this if it didn't happen. But I do want to encourage you to just send one email. I really think there's something in the air, especially with our international families, that think sending 20 emails is the way to go. It really isn't, okay? One thoughtful email. Then we will reply back and thank you, and wouldn't that be lovely? And that's fine. Then it's tied in a bow. You've said thank you. We've said thank you. It's all set. Okay? All right. I also would suggest, or I'd warn you actually, do not say a school is your first choice unless it truly is your first choice. I'm going to say that again. Don't say a school is your first choice if it's not your first choice. It's perfectly fine that you might have 5 schools you're really interested in. So it's best to just say, I really enjoyed learning about Dana Hall School and hope you'll consider me for admission. That's fine. You don't have to end with, this is my first choice school, because guess what happens later? When you're admitted and you choose another school, I'm like, wait a minute. So no need to say all that. Those are my special tips for you. I want to ask the kiddos one more time. What was tip number 1? And what was tip number 2? And guess what, parents? I have the same tips for you. Be yourself and ask good questions. Thank you very much. I'm here to answer any questions you have about the interview. Anyone have any questions about the admission interview or perhaps other parts of the application that you'd like to learn about? Oh, hello. Yes, what's your question?
So I just wanted to know how long usually are the interviews for students and the parents?
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a great question. So he asked, how long are the interviews typically for the students and for the parents? Each school may be a tiny bit different, but typically we're speaking to the student for 20 to 30 minutes. Just depends on how chatty you are, or if we get off topic about frogs and toads, that kind of thing. But typically about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we talk to the parents. I would say more on the 20-ish side, but I would save an hour for the interview. If you're making an appointment and you really have to go to the dentist, I wouldn't, give yourself an hour for the parents and for the student total. That's a great question. Other questions about the admission interview? Yes.
For the parent interview, like, what if your parents' English is not the best?
Excellent question. We welcome students, if they would like to serve as an interpreter, or we welcome families to bring interpreters with them. And you could even go so far as requesting the school to provide an interpreter. We typically don't have a lot of families who do that, but we often have students who join their parents for their portion and serve as a translator. You're welcome to do that. We're not going to ask your parents anything that's going to super embarrass you. So if you were translating, it would be okay, but you're welcome to do that. Okay, great question. Other questions, curiosities, concerns. I've given you all the tips. You feel good now, right? We're going to relax, be ourselves, and ask good questions. Excellent. Thank you all so much for being here today.